Okay, Carlos, hard to follow. I'm also in the very uncomfortable position of being the last speaker before lunch, so I'll try and be as concise as I can here. So this project that I'm going to be working on is joint work with Anna Ferrer at the University of Waterloo. And the idea is to look at language ability and to look at the role of language ability in the acquisition of language ability on the skill match of immigrants arriving in Canada. What I mean, so it's a kind of a unique way of looking at outcomes for immigrants in Canada by looking at how well the matches between the skills that they bring with them from their country of origin, how well that matches with the skills that they end up using in the occupations after they arrive in Canada. Okay, so we're using a kind of unique data set. It's a little bit dated now, but it has some unique features that I'll discuss in just a moment. Okay, so a little bit of background information first. As many of you know, the outcomes of immigrants, the earnings outcomes of immigrants to Canada, successive cohorts have declined since about the 1970s. Okay, so we know that the earnings outcomes have declined, and there's a large literature trying to figure out what's happening, why are these declines occurring among immigrant groups. Okay, so that earnings outcome literature is relatively well known. The other parts perhaps are maybe a little bit less known, and that is that what we observe is that immigrants rarely settle in their intended occupation when they arrive in Canada. So when we can observe your intended occupation, what we observe is that immigrants rarely end up in that intended occupation. Okay. Now, the research looking at the outcomes of immigrants' recent declines points to language and language ability, differences in language ability in more recent cohorts, as one of the dominant explanations for what's going on. So nearly about a third of the decline over that period can be explained directly through language ability. Okay. Other parts that have sort of arisen as important aspects include the decline in returns to foreign experience. Okay, so immigrants arriving today, the foreign experience that they bring with them seems to translate or is less valuable in the labor market today. Okay. And so our project sort of says, well, okay, part of the story is directly related to language, but part of it has to do with foreign experience and how foreign experience is translating when immigrants arrive in Canada. And we're going to look at the role of language and how language might influence the transition of those skills to use in Canada. Okay? So in particular, does it matter? It might be that the occupation that you held in your country of origin was really language intensive. Okay? And so it's going to be difficult when you arrive in Canada to translate those skills in the Canadian labor market. And so we're going to look at the impact of language ability on and how it might help to explain the declining transferability of foreign experience. Okay. So how do we do that? What do we mean by match quality? What data are we going to use? So we're going to use the longitudinal survey of immigrants to Canada, which I said is a little bit dated right now compared to now. So 2001 cohort among 12 months over that period, examining that cohort, and they observed at different points after integration. The nice thing about that data and why we're using it is because it provides information on the occupation that the immigrant had or held prior to arrival in the source country prior to arrival in Canada. We also observe the occupations that they hold in Canada afterwards. Okay? It also has a lot of good information on language ability, but we can also use measures of linguistic distance, how far away from English or French is the country of origin language, and to try and get at language ability. If you don't like self-reports of language ability, for example, we can use linguistic distance and look at how that plays a role. Okay, so we have, so the idea is basically that there are two mechanisms by which language can influence the match. One is obviously through labor market search, and many of you know a lot about labor market search and the issues faced by immigrants. Here we can directly observe whether or not language plays a role in that search process and the matching of skills. Okay, so the main data is LSIC, We also pair that with a kind of unique data set. It's called ONET, the ONET database from the US, which takes each detailed occupation class and looks at the skills that are utilized in those occupations. So different types of skills, including cognitive skills, manual skills, language skills that are used. Okay? And therefore we can sort of create a scale, if you like, or a distance measure that's going to tell us how far away from your skill level that you held in the occupation in the source country is the job that you hold when you come to Canada. Okay? And then we can look at language and see, is it the case that poor language skills mean that you're going to have a much worse outcome, and then be able to say something about language and how that translates into occupational outcomes in Canada.